That Zach is starting to record. So thank you, everyone. Welcome. Glad that you're here. Before we begin, I just like to acknowledge that we are based in and working in communities situated in the unceded territory of the Wabanaki Confederacy. And then I want to thank you again for joining us this morning. This is an online learning opportunity hosted by Community Resilience Partnerships regional coordinators, along with our many community partners who've come on board and share their expertise with you through their presentations. The series is titled Building Stronger Communities. It's designed for communities who are already enrolled in the Community Resilience Partnership or the CRP. Also for those who are interested in enrolling, and we are happy to share more information about that. Zach's going to put a link in the chat for the Community Resilience Partnership. And then also for folks who are currently enrolling and looking ahead at sort of how they envision they might use community and action grant funding to forward their resilience goals. So over the next 5 years, the Inflation Reduction Act, which also is sometimes called IRA, will invest $19 million in Maine's EV charging infrastructure. And that poses this question: what will Maine's transportation sector look like in 5 years? And why should we and municipalities be paying attention? So today we're going to hear from some of the leaders watching e-mobility from both private and public lenses. So I'm going to do a quick introduction of myself and my colleague, Zach. So I'm Gabe McPhail, and I serve as one of the regional coordinators in Region 1 of the Community Resilience Partnership. I collaborate with colleagues that are at Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission, Greater Portland Council of Governments, and Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission. We support communities who are enrolled in the Community Resilience Partnership based in York, Cumberland, Saginaw, Lincoln, and Knox counties, and we also serve 9 municipalities in southern Oxford County. So I'm joined behind the scenes today by Community Resilience Partnership Region 3 Coordinator, Zach Goslin. Zach works with Androscoggin Valley Council of Governments, or AVCOG, and serves communities enrolled in the Community Resilience Partnership located in Androscoggin, Oxford, Kennebec, Franklin, and Somerset counties. He's also a Community Resilience Partnership service provider who enrolls communities in the CRP. So I want to say a great thank you to all of our presenters today: Barry Woods, Scott Blon, Sarah Mills-Knapp, and John Gagne, and Molly Siegel. Thank you for being with us today. And I will introduce each of them as we bring them on to present. So just a quick reminder, and not to be boring after many years of Zoom now, but here's our Zoom etiquette for folks who just want to dust off their Zoom etiquette. It's great to have your video on, unless you have something distracting going on, just assuming you want to be engaged, especially during the Q&A. And if you want to rename yourself, if your name isn't appearing as you would like it. And then just a reminder, you can always type your questions into the Zoom chat, and we're going to collect those throughout. So as they come up for you and you want to jot them down, that would be great. And then during our Q&A, we'll make sure to address the questions that we collect. So just a quick overview for what we're going to be discussing today. Our focus is really on looking at the future of e-mobility, EV charging in communities. What does that look like? And then we're going to learn a little bit more about what the municipal EV toolkit is. And then we're going to look at some resources for EVs and EV charging around Efficiency Maine, or from Efficiency Maine. And then we'll do our Q&A. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. So Barry Woods is Revision Energy's Senior Director of E-Mobility. And Barry directs Revision's approach to the rapidly growing area of electric vehicle infrastructure through sales, marketing, and also business development. This encompasses everything from selecting residential electric vehicle chargers to building relationships with electric vehicle charging vendors, and also helping workplaces develop electric vehicle charging resources for their employees. Barry also serves as the president of the board of Plug In America, the nation's first nonprofit dedicated to promoting public adoption of electric vehicles. So Barry, sorry, Barry, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you, Gabe. I did do the screen share. Can you guys see it okay? Great. And this has been a good opportunity for me to review the current status of the vehicles and infrastructure deployment, which it's always good to learn some things. I've been involved in this for a while, so nice to have a chance to do a retrospective. I have a semi humorous title to this talk. The ICE age has ended, and ICE is actually in electric vehicle circles known as an acronym for an internal combustion engine. So it has a nice double entendre there. I'm going to give you a quick, just a real quick background in case you have not familiar. Revision Energy is initially Maine-based company, one of the largest, perhaps the largest regional solar commercial residential installer with, I think we're over 400 employees now. The slide is probably a little dated. And we are 100% employee owned. We're also a certified B Corp. We just got our B Corp certification renewal and we scored 150, which is 1 point below Patagonia, which puts us in very rarefied company in terms of B Corp status, which is a pretty phenomenal achievement. And what are we doing? What do I do day to day in EV related services? We do a lot of residential work, as you know, but my focus is on commercial. And we do projects, turnkey electric vehicle projects, both level 2 and the higher amperage DC fast charging projects. In Maine, I think we've done 17 of the 18 state funded in some level or another. We're in the process of doing that. So pretty extensive experience with the higher amperage design eval. We do service and maintenance on chargers. We are looking at lots of opportunities for crossover between clean energy and clean transportation. As you can imagine, PV is a pretty good source of electrons. And if you can attach that to vehicles, it's a really nice match. We spend a lot of time in terms of education of folks. And then we're exploring a lot of business models that includes bidirectional, where your car is used as a battery, for example, in a residential application for backup generation. The Ford F-150 is a poster child for that, I think, at the moment. We're also looking at fleet applications for EV PV. And then purposes of this group, probably one of the more interesting elements of our business model is that we're starting to own and operate charging infrastructure, both in Maine and New Hampshire. We've got some units, level 2 units currently in Concord, New Hampshire, and we're about to go online with DC fast charging in Belfast and Ellsworth. And as the federal monies start to flow, finding organizations that are reliable and are interested in owning and operating, especially if you're a muni, which is part of the requirements, as Molly will go into, is something that we're definitely interested in. So maybe follow up offline, take note of my contact info. But anyway, it's interesting to see the variety of opportunities that EVs are presenting in the workplace. I think it bears reminding folks that transportation accounts for the largest share of carbon emissions in virtually every state. And in Maine, I think it's 54% of all carbon emissions come from the transportation sector. You will never see an EV in a picture like this. So that's I think important to take note of. And when we're thinking about, I'm going to talk about electric vehicle uptake, and then I'm going to talk about charging stations a bit in terms of uptake. And Gabe, I haven't timed it myself, so I don't know. Give me a scowl if I'm close to burning through all of the time. I think I'll be okay. I've been in this business since 2009, so that is not even reflected on the far left-hand side of the chart here. But I remember the first year that EVs came out, they sold a whopping total of 17,000 plugins for the year, and that was the Tesla Roadster, the Nissan Leaf, and the Chevy Volt with a V. you can see we've come a long way since then, and we had a little bit of a flattening of the curve during COVID with supply issues. We still have some supply issues, but we're now currently at almost 3.5 million plug-in vehicles. And if you look at the graph, one thing that I noticed, it took us basically 8 years to get to 1 million vehicles. And then from 1 million to 2 million, it was about 3 years. And now, I mean, it's compressing rapidly as supply and manufacturer diversity occurs. And so while it's not a hockey stick historically here, it's still a pretty sharp trajectory. And I think we're going to see that continue on for sure. And so just in terms of some of the numbers that I think bear noting as if I'm a municipality and I'm trying to think about what's going to happen in 5 years, we're really in a brave new world in a lot of ways. I mean, there's probably 300 plus million vehicles total in the light duty passenger fleet in the United States. I think 300 and something million. And we're at 1%, let's say, right now, with almost 3.5 million plug-in vehicles sold. But it's the uptake that's really interesting. So for example, we had a total of 90,000 vehicles sold in February this year, which is 52% higher than February of last year. And we've already, sold 174,000 vehicles total for Q1 2023. So if you go back to my original, graph with the trajectory, we only sold 17,000 vehicles for the entire year. I mean, now we're selling that almost probably on a daily basis, probably more. So I think when we're getting into this kind of uptake, it bears noting as you're starting to think about planning. And so for the first time in September, the total percentage of new cars that had plugs exceeded 7% for the first time. And just to give you some additional historical context, it took 10 years basically for the uptake to reach 2% of all new cars. And now that's tripled in 2 years. And obviously there's a lot going on behind the scenes. But one other thing that bears noting here, I think, is that the majority of those cars that are being sold are the all battery electrics, the BEVs, as opposed to the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles like the Chevy Volt that came out with, which has gas on board. Originally, there was a big concern about range anxiety. And if you looked at the numbers, probably for almost the first 10 years, it was a 50-50 uptake. 50% of the plug-in vehicles sold were battery electrics and 50% were plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Now we're starting to see a bigger shift for a variety of reasons, which would probably take too much time for me to go into. But that tells me that the charging infrastructure actually needs to be more robust. If you have gas, your reason for getting gas as a backup is to avoid public charging and other things. If you have all battery electrics, it's a pure play. You have to have electricity to go anywhere. And so that puts, I think, greater emphasis on providing some type of plug-in opportunity, whether that's, in this case, public or municipal type applications. So I think that's an interesting falling out here as we're starting to see purchasing behavior go much, much more in favor of the all battery electric, which is where you save the most amount of money, frankly, as well, in terms of maintenance and operating costs. So if we talk about the state of charging, I always refer people to go to PlugShare, which is a phone app. And if I'm a municipality and I'm trying to figure out, well, what kind of charging resources are in my immediate area, if you go on PlugShare, you can actually see, like this map on the left shows you, where the public charging or other types of charging are located. And it's pretty dense based on this view. This is, I don't know, several hundred miles up by satellite view. If you drill down, obviously there's still a lot of gaps and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But I think it's important to note, PlugShare will help give you some idea of the fast charging opportunities that are close to you, as well as level 2 opportunities. And I threw that picture in of the DC fast charger because this is a unit that we just did for as part of an Efficiency Maine grant program for DC fast charging. This is in Newport. And we're starting to see large energy retailers like Irving Oil getting involved in this. And this is at an Irving station in Newport. They've got one now. They've got a couple of them and in another Bangor-based service station. They're going in Fairfield. Let's see. They're going in Auburn, and they're going to have 3 more in down east. I mean, Baileyville, and then up in the county, Fort Kent, Presque Isle. So the transition, when you start to see large energy retailers like a Irving, I mean, that tells you where we're headed here. I also just think it bears noting in terms of charging opportunities. This pyramid sort of gives you an idea. Public charging is actually in the minority of driving charging behaviors. And I think it bears noting that most people who own plugins, at the moment, are single family resident type owners, and they can charge at home 80–90% of the time. You use public charging many times, the higher amperage ones, for long distance corridor travel to get, past the battery range to enhance that as you need it. And then level 2 for opportunity charging, like Efficiency Maine talks about, for, hospitality industry, destination charging, tourism, municipal parking areas, like in Norway where Scott Vaughan is located. They've had charging for a long time right in the downtown area, which really benefits the core commercial district. So, it's an important element of charging. It's probably not the most used, but again, with the uptake numbers that we're seeing, this pyramid may start to change a bit. When the car's population becomes, instead of 1% of all vehicles, 20 or 30%. And so in terms of ports right now, we've got a total of about 128,000 nationally, some type of public charging port with a growth rate. What's interesting here is that New England for Q3, and I've got the citations for this. I think this is from National Renewable Energy Lab. I think Northeast region had the highest growth rate of public charging at 11% for this last quarter. But California has 30% of all public charging infrastructure because they have been out of the gate the fastest, and they have the highest uptake in terms of sales percentage. I think they're at 12, maybe 13% now, maybe more, of all new car sales in California have plugs. That's why they're so far ahead. The highest increase in the number of ports was DC fast charging, but level 2 is still by far the vast majority of public charging opportunities out there. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But if you think about the goal that the Biden administration has set, which is the 500,000 electric charging ports by 2030, these uptake numbers have got to increase really fast. I mean, for Q3, we had 6,000 ports. If we want to get to 500,000, we've got to have 12,000 new ports or more per quarter over the next 8 years. So double what we already are at. And, of those, a lot of them are going to be DC fast charging, just because of the nature of the travel corridors and the type of coverage. So more expensive, higher amperage, much greater investment is going to be needed to get the public charging to match what we're going to see in terms of demand from the vehicles. So what's driving a lot of this? Well, feds, and Molly will talk about, state-based. So I'm not going to spend much time on that, but feds, obviously, with the Inflation Reduction Act, with incentives for the vehicles, they've got the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Act, which is driving a lot of the charging that states now have got the funding for. That's called NEVI in the state bucket. They've got a discretionary fund that we've been talking about. That's 2.5 billion. And now every day is a new day. Over the weekend, EPA said they're going to strengthen CAFE standards to a point where they haven't released the numbers, but it could go up to 40 plus miles per gallon as the minimum requirement, which effectively eliminates combustion engines from meeting that requirement, which in and of itself, from a carrot and stick standpoint, will become a huge driver of manufacturer, retrofitting and consumer interest and so forth. So a lot of stuff going on. I mean, there's definitely work that needs to be done in all these areas. Utilities are, in many states have make-ready capability, which means that they're able to use through the PUC, they're allowed to use rate basing like they do for transmission lines, to help build out the underlying electrical infrastructure support. Maine hasn't done that. I think there's probably some room, for us to work on that. Demand charges, are a pet peeve of mine, which it's part of their rate structure in the built environment, and it can have very harsh consequences when you're doing public charging for vehicles, because it was never really designed to address that. And so there's work that needs to be done on the policy and rate design front, but there's a lot going on. And I think you're going to see, as a municipality, we're starting to see municipalities like Scarborough, South Portland, and Portland amending their codes to require preemptive design of parking areas and surface lots that have a certain percentage of EV charging capability. And I think that's going to be the next thing. So it's a really interesting world we live in. I think it bears noting that Maine, in the last Plug in America survey, that was, I think it's a year plus, we scored 9th out of all states in terms of our friendliness to supporting EV drivers. So I see that I'm cranking along time-wise, so I'm going to wrap it up. But Maine's a good place to drive electric, and it's going to continue to be a good place and a better place with all of the collective efforts. So if you have any sites you're interested in, reach out. It's at barryw@revisionenergy.com. EV is in our name, Revision Energy. Thank you so much. I'm going to end my, see if I can figure out how to stop screen sharing here. Let's see.
Thank you so much, Barry. That was great. A lot of really good information and overview, I think, especially for municipalities and considerations there. So thank you so much. Lots of facts I was unaware of too, so very helpful. We're going to turn it over now to Scott Blond, the Executive Director for the Center for an Ecology-Based Economy in Norway. Scott sees a profound need to rapidly relocalize and solarize our economy to help future generations and wild nature thrive in the face of increasing climate instability and resource depletion. The Center for an Ecology-Based Economy helps Maine communities take advantage of public funding opportunities for decarbonization and energy efficiency improvement projects. Thank you so much for being here, Scott. Oh, I think the mute is still on your phone there, or your Zoom. There you are. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Well, thanks for having us today, and thanks, Barry, for that presentation, and double thanks, because without Barry, we wouldn't have the charging infrastructure we have here. He was instrumental in that, as was Revision Energy really early on, and I'll get to that. As some of you know, I got called in to do this at the last second because Tony Jambro, who's been working on this project, had to leave town. So I threw together some slides. It's more of a little storytelling and less about statistics than what Barry had. So this is a little bit more what it looks like on the ground out here in Western Maine. If I can get these slides to advance. There we go. So we had to put our first charger here in Norway back in 2014. And that was due to Revision Energy. We had had a little presentation here about a community solar farm. And as a thanks, Will Kessler dropped off this EV charger here, this little 20 amp EV charger, as a gift. And nobody really knew what to do with it. But luckily we had Fred Garbo, who we quickly dubbed the EV Angelist, come in and say, oh, yeah, let's put that in the town square. And we went and talked to the town, and the cost to the town was so minimal, and it was, we believe, the first free public EV charger in the state, municipal EV charger. The next year we put one over in Paris, and we started doing an annual event around where we were installing chargers. I've got some pictures of that. And shortly after that, we got funding through an anonymous foundation, thanks to Barry, somebody who he had been working with, and mentioned that we were starting to do this work out here in Western Maine. They funded our project for a couple of years, and we were able to build out a network. Some of our chargers have solar offsets, and then we use those chargers and those, as we were building out to do education around EVs. So right now, our network out here, we have 18 plugs at 13 sites. They're all free. 5 of them are hosted by municipalities. And we range from our region. This is a stretch for CB. We kind of pushed our service area out a little bit. We go from like Freiburg to Poland, up to Buckfield, and up into the Bethel area, and a lot right down in Norway, South Paris as well. So those are all free destination chargers. And the ones in Norway, the ones at our high school, the one in South Paris, a couple of the ones in Bethel are really starting to get a lot of traffic, especially in Norway now. The chargers are quite full all the time. So we're starting to shift to, thanks to Efficiency Maine, which Molly's going to talk about, we were able to get funding to shift some of those more traffic chargers over to network charging, and CB is actually putting up the match on a lot of those, and we'll be kind of managing those, and at some point will be become an income stream for CB. And we're hoping to continue to build out the network and have somebody here like Tony that's going to be in charge of that. So it'll be we'll be basically running a little business around EV charging. And then in this latest round, Tony's been working with some towns in northern Cumberland County as well to help them get out of the gate on this. So just, yeah, this is downtown Norway. This was our very first EV Expo. And you can see over there with the big ribbon and everything, we had one 20 amp charger on that pole. And it was a big day for Norway to have this EV charger in there. So you can see how many people came out. There's Barry back there with his clipboard getting ready. He was a big part of this in the beginning as well. Would come up and talk at our expos about, how important this all was. This was a few years later at our EV Expo. We did a big ribbon cutting for this. We have 3 plugs over there. I have another picture of that, but you can see like the school superintendent and town managers who are really starting to engage the community. We went before the school board to get this approved. And this has 3 plugs that are almost completely offset. I think lately we're starting to exceed what that tracker can produce, but that's a 6,000 watt tracker that basically offsets all the charging at the high school. And so right as you drive into the school. So again, it's like combining education with actually building out some useful infrastructure. And these are always during the school day, they're always full now. And the teachers there kind of have a little rotation. They keep track of each other who's charging. We also just to put a shout out to e-bikes, we really we're trying to do a lot beyond EVs in the transportation sector, and cycling is one, and we're really pushing on the e-bike thing, which right now Efficiency Maine is talking about rebates on e-bikes as well. And that seems like a big part of the future of electric vehicles for us, because they're so much more efficient than cars and safer and better on the roads. Whoops. So in terms of our education stuff, these are some pieces that we did. So we're finding that our whole EV, we do an annual EV Expo. This will be our 9th one this year, I think. We're starting to realize that just doing a ride and drive and explaining the basics of EVs over and over again is, it's a little redundant, and we're not getting a lot of people that are more in the space. So now we're kind of shifting to some deeper discussions about the future of transportation, about the lithium cycle, things like that. But for people that just want to know, like, how does that charging work again? We've created some informational posters that we keep up in here, and we have them at the expos as well. So this is what our charging network looks like right now, and you can sort of see there we are, Freiburg over in the lower corner, and Bethel down to Pole and Buckfield, and then that nucleus there in Norway, South Paris, and that's where we've focused our efforts. Most of the outlying ones are single plugs, except for Bethel. We have 2 dual plug installations up there. The other thing that we've done too that nobody really talks about is whenever we install an EV charger, we usually put a 20 amp outlet there for charging a bicycle, or people that if the 2 chargers are full, somebody can still trickle charge if they're in an emergency situation to get where they're going. Or if we've had a couple of people with some old funky cars that don't work on the J1772s that have used our outlets. This is what the one in Norway looks like. This was this morning. Usually, as you can see here, there's 2 cars. We have two dedicated spots there. These are open 24/7. All of our chargers, part of our requirement was that there would be dedicated spots and they'd be open 24/7. On any given day, you'll see, it's a lot of locals use these, but on any given day, you'll see, cars from Massachusetts, Connecticut, mostly New England, but occasionally from further away that are using these, and they charge and then they go spend money in our downtown, and that's how we sold this to the town of Norway. They really thought that it would be worthwhile, and in the beginning, the cost per month was, 30 or 40 or $50 a month to run these chargers. Now it's, it's getting up to, well, $200 or $300 a month in the summer, probably maybe even more than that. So this is the one over at the high school. And you can see at the high school, we put this whole educational, it's like a little sign there that explains how it all works and just the whole, like, why EVs are important. I can't remember everything that's on there, but it basically talks about how the solar works and how that offsets the electricity. And you can see our efforts have kind of paid off. So in the upper left there, where you can see there's 3 towns that are in the dark. This is the NRCM annual, or they do it, I think they've done it twice, where it's showing EVs per capita in different areas. And you can see our little neck of the woods up here has pretty high penetration for being a rural conservative area, especially Norway. There's pretty high. So we have signage on all our things, and explains like who's paying for the electricity and all of that. And just recently, with the cost of electricity going up, and we're starting to get some blowback from some of the people who are providing the power, we started doing this, put this little QR code on there so people can donate, and we collect the money. And it's separate for every charger, so we know where we're getting the money, and then we share the money with the, in this case, the town, or we'll share the money with the high school or the museum up in Bethel. Those are some of the ones that are getting the most use. The movie theater in Bethel is getting a lot of traffic, and he started his own donation program there. So that's one way to do this. And of course, doing those destination chargers, those free ones, is way, way cheaper than network charging, which is why we've kind of stuck to this as long as we could. But with the Efficiency Maine rebates that just came up, we thought this was an opportunity for us to jump onto the network charging thing. The other thing that we've done is we've put 3-hour limits on some of our chargers, just to get people that aren't, we do have some locals that will bring their car over there at night and leave it there all night, and just are using that as their regular charging. And we're really trying to discourage that. South Paris almost shut theirs off because they actually had somebody with 2 cars that was just leaving a car and going to work and then coming back and leaving another one. And they were just like really abusing the situation. And we almost lost that one. But we knew who the person was, and we talked to them and explained that wasn't what these were all about. Again, with that demand, this is one morning I came into Norway. This is, you can see our charging station over there. Every car in the lot was an EV. And it's like, okay, so things are changing, mission accomplished in a way, but now we've got to kind of move on from the free charging. And so this is my last slide. This is just from a little PDF that we brought over to the town, and we've got town approval now in Norway to do 3 dual plug network chargers. One that we're going to replace the ones we've got over here on Deering Street, and then we've got 2 other sites that are just within walking distance from downtown. That Water Street site is a trailhead for the Land Trust, and the Whitman Street site is out behind CB in our fair share parking lot, and it's right by the Grange. And it also has 3-phase power there. So we're just waiting patiently for some funding to put a level 3 charger in there, which people in the community are just clamoring for right now. Yeah, so I'll leave it there. So that's where we are. And like I said, we're also working, we're sort of extending our range down into northern Cumberland County at this point as well. We've got, I think Tony's working with 3 different towns down there to do some network charging, but we won't own those. We won't be managing those. That will be managed by the town. Yeah. All right.
Thank you so much, Scott. That was, I took a lot of notes. And I really appreciate the perspective too. And I'm curious too about like the sort of what's next question in terms of networked, moving from free to networked. That seems like a great thing for communities to be aware of. So maybe we will get time to talk a little bit about that during our Q&A. So I noticed that we have Sarah Mills-Knapp and John Gagne who just came into the Zoom room, and I don't want to put you guys on the spot. Would you like Molly is able to go before you, unless you feel like you're ready to jump right in.
We're happy to jump right in. We're
All right.
coming off another presentation about
Yeah, you're doing
EVs.
the
So it's right.
bouncing. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's great. Let me introduce you both and then I'll turn it over to you. That's great. Thank you so much. And thanks again, Scott. So Sarah Mills-Knapp just entered the Zoom room with John. So Sarah's the Director of Sustainability at the Greater Portland Council of Governments, or GPCOG, where she leads the statewide Clean Maine Communities program and supports members with technical assistance on key sustainability issues. Sarah has extensive experience providing technical, financial, and organizational guidance around urban sustainability programs for cities around the world through her work with World Bank, the U.S. Agency for International Development, and the C40 Cities Network. Sarah has a master's in sustainability management from Columbia University in New York and a bachelor's in international relations from the American University in Washington, D.C. And her partner, John Gagne, is the Sustainability Program Associate at Greater Portland Council of Governments, or GPCOG, and supports Maine Clean Communities. John helps facilitate the Drive Electric Maine stakeholder group, develops the monthly Maine Clean Communities newsletter, conducts outreach, education, and technical assistance to stakeholders, and helps coordinate the day-to-day tasks of the coalition. So thank you both for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gabe. Thanks for the introduction. So we have some slides. So first I'll talk a little bit about Maine Clean Communities, our coalition, and what our kind of charge is and mission is. So the Maine Clean Communities is a program that has been hosted at the Greater Portland Council of Governments for almost 25 years. It is a national network of coalitions. There's at least one, if not more, in most of the states in the United States, and it's funded through a Department of Energy grant that has been quite steady for the past 25 years, which is really amazing. The focus of the program is really for us, our coalitions, to be kind of the boots on the ground in states and engaging with fleets of all different kinds to transition to alternative forms of fueling for transportation. And this could be everything from propane to natural gas to, now in Maine, much more focused on electrification. So a lot of our work is on electrification of transportation, but we support really all types of fuel. We are fuel neutral. That's what we are supposed to say. So we learn a lot from our national partners that we can bring back to Maine. And there's a lot of national tools developed by the Department of Energy and the national labs that work with the Department of Energy that we have access to, which is really amazing. So we have an excellent sort of wealth of knowledge and resources to draw on to help support electrification and other types of alternative fuels in Maine. Go ahead, John. So we developed a municipal EV toolkit along with Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission a couple years ago. And the reason why we did it was that we'd really had heard a lot from communities, from our municipal members about, what is our role in electrification of vehicles. They would maybe buy one vehicle, or two to have in their fleet, often like an inspector's car, various vehicles, but they didn't really understand sort of what was their more comprehensive look at both addressing electrification in their municipal operations, but also, what was the municipal role in encouraging their residents in the community more broadly to transition to electric vehicles. So we developed a toolkit to kind of help municipalities understand how they were doing to date and what they could do in the future to encourage electrification. And along with SMPDC, we created this resource that we host on our website. So obviously, we also recognize that there's a quite aggressive statewide target, and Maine won't wait to to put 40,000 light duty EVs on the road by 2025. There's about 8,000 now, roughly, which has been a huge growth over like I think a 50% growth or something like that over 2019. So the pace is certainly accelerating, but we need to accelerate it even faster in order to hit the statewide goal. And I think municipalities and obviously residents have a key role to play in that, because we're really the ones on the ground. So we see our role as in trying to really help support, catalyze and hasten that progress that we're making. So John is can walk you through the toolkit a little bit and just talk about the resources that are there. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, hi, thanks everyone. So like Sarah mentioned, we had developed this toolkit with partnering with SMPDC to really streamline the municipal electrification process and really help guide the different aspects that are involved. And so we kind of broke the toolkit down into these three main sections. So the first section is on EV readiness assessment. So this is found right on our website. It's like a survey format. You fill out a bunch of answers, and it'll actually tell you, which parts of EV readiness or which key components a municipality will need to focus on or will need to adopt or change in order to become EV ready. And once you do the assessment, that's really where you get the baseline information and you get the output of where you should focus your attention and what are the key metrics that you need to hit. And then the second step is to review what we've developed as EV readiness guides. And so we outlined these key components that a municipality will need to focus on or should learn more about in order to have a successful transition or adoption of electric vehicles. So we have a readiness guide on the municipal fleet transition process, zoning and ordinance. That's going to be a key one to future development of EV adoption, looking at the permitting and inspection process that community members, businesses, et cetera, need to go through in order to install EV charging stations. And then there's also this planning and leadership guide, which, maybe you don't need a guide on how to plan and be a leader, but municipalities will really play a key role in widespread adoption of electric vehicles and EV charging stations within their communities. And then the final step is we really have this like checklist that we created that ties all these things together and really pulls on from the EV readiness assessment that you can print out as a PDF and check off as you go. And so one of the first guides that we cover is a municipal fleet transition guide. So this outlines some key strategies that a fleet will need to focus on in order to transition or adopt electric vehicles. So one of the key things that a municipality can do is use a fleet planning tool. I have a list of fleet planning tools at the end that are useful, and this will look at total cost of ownership, fuel price comparisons. You can look at duty cycles, charging habits. There's a lot of different things that go into the successful adoption of an electric vehicle. You can update your municipal purchasing policies. So as a municipality is looking to retire vehicles and purchase new ones, specifically calling out for the purchase or adoption of electric vehicles instead. There's a variety of funding sources that are typically available through Efficiency Maine in Maine. And then there's a variety of federal resources that municipalities can tap into. And there might even be some manufacturing incentives to help ease the cost burden of an electric vehicle. And then, of course, installing the proper EV infrastructure to meet the fleet's needs. So zoning and ordinance is going to be a big part of it. So identifying EV charging stations as a permitted use in zoning districts will be big as communities are looking to install more charging across town. Some towns are even taking the approach to require EV charging stations and parking facilities and adopting new EV ordinances, setting general requirements for EV infrastructure standards and accessibility, and then clarifying regulations for EV parking spaces. So providing adequate signing, parking limits, et cetera. So, EV ordinances will be a big thing for towns to adopt and help ease the transition of electric vehicles. So there's these terminologies of EV capable, EV ready, and EV installed, which just outlines the different levels of capacity that a parking space might have. And so South Portland and Scarborough both have really great examples of new EV ordinances that they've adopted. So check those out if you want to see some real world examples. Permitting and inspections. So permitting can be a challenge and it's different within every community. So it's recommended that municipalities, if they have the capacity, to create a separate permitting system for EV charging stations rather than using the generic electric code permitting station or permitting process. So the permitting process can be kind of confusing. Some municipalities have full jurisdiction. Sometimes the permitting process might go through the state. So making sure that, as communities and municipalities are looking to adopt more EV charging stations and EVs, that there's a clear process outlined, whether it be on their website or something that's public facing to help ease the transition and the process for the permitting. Offer options to submit permit applications electronically. Some municipalities do not have this option, which might create barriers or make it more challenging for the permitting process. And then sometimes there are standardized permitting and inspection fees. So consider reducing them or creating a flat fee for that. And then there's a planning and leadership guide. And again, these are just like the high level topics that are included in each of the guides. All of the guides are found on our website and you can read through them if you'd like. So incorporating EVs into relevant local plans will be huge for widespread adoption. So as we all know, some of the biggest policy plans might be a comp plan. So specifically calling out EV adoption or EV expansion into a town's comp plan or a climate action plan. So a lot of towns, especially in Southern Maine and through the Community Resiliency Partnership, are electing to conduct their first climate action plan. So specifically calling out EV adoption or the installation of EV charging stations as a strategy to reduce the impacts of climate change, and a climate action plan is becoming more and more frequent and will help reach the broader state targets. Ensuring equitable access to public EV charging infrastructure. There has been recent guidance that has been officially adopted for the siting and equity accessibility of EV charging stations that we can share out to this group. Municipal programs to encourage EVs and EV infrastructure. So for example, Portland and South Portland have an Electrify Everything campaign, which specifically offers rebates and incentives to some of these adoptions. There's a variety of stakeholder groups across the state that municipalities or community members or whoever is really interested can participate in, stay up to date on what's happening in Maine, funding resources, technical assistance. A shameless plug for us is we run the Drive Electric Maine group, which meets on a quarterly basis, and we talk about a variety of really useful topics concerning EV adoption. And then you can also partner with other municipalities on EV infrastructure development. So, there are examples of doing bulk procurement that can help really ease the cost burden on a municipality. You can go in with multiple municipalities on a charging procurement. So, if there's a larger market for an EV service provider, they might be more inclined to set up a deal. Portland, for example, has a deal with EVgo to install 40 some odd chargers over the next few years, which will really streamline the charging network in Maine. And then, so, as you're going through this process, there are a variety of fleet electrification tools that are very useful. A-Fleet, the alternative fuel life cycle, environmental and economic transportation topic is really good for looking at total cost of ownership, duty cycles, maintenance costs, etc. And then these are a variety of other really useful tools that someone might take advantage of to help plan the transition period or adoption of electric vehicles. And we can share out links to all of these as well. And then through Clean Cities, and we can work directly with a community or a town to help them through this process of adopting EVs or installing charging stations. We have access to a broad array of technical assistance and really experts in the field on a variety of subject matters. So we have access to a technical response service. So any inquiries or questions that you might have pertaining to any of this information, policy examples, etc. We can actually send your question directly into them, or you can send it directly to them. And they'll give us more than enough information as a response, which has been really helpful. And we've used it for several communities that have had questions that we might not have the answer to. We can find the answer somewhere, which is really helpful. And then I wanted to call out this sort of program that we're a part of. So we can work directly with communities to help install charging. So we're part of this national program called Empower Workplace Charging, where a lot of charging happens at the home. But one of the challenges is if you live in a multi-unit dwelling, if you live in a condo, if you live in some living situation where you can't install a charging station, one of the ways to address that gap is to install charging at a workplace. So if you're a workplace, if you're a municipality, we want to work directly with you to help install EV charging stations. This is part of a national network of coalitions that are doing this work across the state. So the hope of the end product of this program is to have 3,500 new installed EV charging stations or EV ports across the country. And so the role that we can really provide to your business or workplace, whether you're a private entity, nonprofit, local government, what have you, we can help do employer and employee engagement on EV charging. We can help you identify available funding opportunities. So we keep a close eye on both state and federal funding opportunities for EV charging stations or even EVs as well. Coordination with utilities and EV service providers. So as you go through this process, you'll need to be in touch with whoever your utility provider is. You'll need to get quotes for the charging stations and from electricians. And then, of course, we have access to the technical assistance and resources through our Clean Cities network to really help you through this process. And then you also are going to be part of this national network of employer EV charging. So we can help do marketing for your workplace as a leader in this effort, which is great. And, this project is unique in the sense that it's specifically targeting 40% of workplaces that are owned, operated, or serve traditionally underserved communities. So there's a large equity component to this. And I believe it's one of the first national charging programs that specifically calls out equity as a focus. So if you are a workplace or nonprofits, private sector, whatever your entity is, we're ready and eager to work with you and help you through this process of installing charging. And I think that's everything.
Thanks, John. Gabe, are we doing questions at the end?
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
we'll reserve our questions for the end. Thank you
Great.
both so much. We really just appreciate all of the information, and that it seems like there's just so many questions, but it's such a great resource, and you've certainly I don't want to say taken guesswork out of things, but just amazing amount of information and resources. Especially, I'm glad we're recording this so we can use it for municipal leaders and community groups interested in this transition. Thank you again, especially for stepping in right when you came into the room. Much appreciated to you both.
Yeah, no worries. Happy to be here.
So now we're going to turn it over to Molly Siegel. So Molly is the program manager for electric vehicle initiatives at Efficiency Maine. And Efficiency Maine is the administrator for programs to improve the efficiency of energy use and reduce greenhouse gases in Maine. It serves all sectors and all regions of the state. Its suite of nationally recognized programs provides consumer information, discounts, rebates, loans, and investment for high energy, clean energy equipment and strategies to manage energy demand. Thank you so much, Molly. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm just gonna get my screen share set up here. All right, is that looking okay to everyone?
Looks great.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to give an introduction to the resources that we have available that can potentially benefit municipalities that are looking to install EV chargers for public use. And before I go into that, I just want to make sure I mention that in addition to EV charging initiatives, we also provide rebates for the vehicles themselves. So we have a statewide EV rebate program for consumers, businesses, and actually local governments can take advantage of this as well. We have a $7,500 rebate for battery electric vehicles for municipal use. So just keep in mind that in addition to the charging infrastructure, we can help with the vehicles as well. But this presentation will be mostly focused on EV charging. So wherever you are in your journey, whether you're just starting to learn about EV charging or whether you have a community that's already installed EV chargers or is already really deep into the work of planning one of these projects, we have a guidebook called Installing Level 2 Chargers that's available on our website and also available in hard copy. So if you want to give us a call, we can mail you as many of these as you'd like. This is a free resource that we want to help to spread the word about the different considerations that go into an EV charging project. And this is a short presentation today, so I'll only get to touch on a few of the points, but if you want to go deeper into any of these ideas, it's all in the guidebook. So that's on our website, and we also have hard copies. And I always want to start with talking about the different types of charging. This is sort of EV charging 101. Many of you are already familiar with this concept, but it's always good to reiterate. There are 3 different levels of EV charging, level 1, 2, and 3. They correspond with increasing power levels, increasing speed of charging, and of course, increased costs. So both the upfront costs and the ongoing maintenance costs are lower on the low end and then higher for level 3 or DC fast chargers. Level 1 is a typical household outlet. And most EVs can charge using a level 1 outlet, but it just takes a really long time. So that's really only applicable for home use or for e-bikes, a really long duration charging. When we're thinking about public EV charging, we're typically talking about either level 2 or level 3. As Barry mentioned, there's a much higher number of level 2 ports or plugs out there. They're just more ubiquitous. They cost a lot less to install. However, for people that are driving on long road trips, DC fast charging is really becoming what people are looking for so that they can get a quick charge along the way. So we see both of these, and we have programs that fund both of these types of chargers. And there's just a lot of considerations that go into what is the best type of charger for any particular location. So just for reference, level 2 chargers get you about 25 miles of driving range per hour of charging. So that's a substantial amount of charge. If you park in a place and get 25 miles, that can usually, often that can get you to your next destination. However, fast chargers can they can charge most vehicles from 20 to 80% in 15 to 30 minutes. And it's faster. A lot of the newer cars have a faster charging capacity. So, the F-150 Lightning and a lot of these new cars that are coming out are able to take a higher rate of charge than some of the older vehicles. So that's a trend that we're seeing. A little bit more into the differences between the two, level 2 and DC fast charging, that you might want to think about if you're considering one of these projects. Level 2 chargers are really for extended charge times. We typically say a place where people are already parking for, anywhere between an hour and a half to 12 hours. So overnight locations, hospitality locations can be good for this, as well as recreational facilities, downtowns. You know, the town of Norway, great example of a downtown where people are already going here to do their business and to shop and to visit. And it's an opportunity for them to get a little bit of extra charge on their way somewhere. They do have a relatively lower cost. They can still cost a lot to install, but we look at anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 per charging port. So that covers the installation, some of the utility work, the equipment, as well as some of the operating costs, such as networking, software, and maintenance contracts. That's the typical range that we see. Could be more, could be less than that. Non-networked chargers that are typically installed in a home are lower than that. So that's the $1,000 to $2,000 per plug for private use. So that there is a difference there. And some public chargers are non-networked, as Scott mentioned. However, it's becoming more common because of increased use and the need to recover some of those operating costs to use networked chargers where you can charge people a fee for use. For DC fast charging, as I mentioned, people will usually charge up in less than an hour. Could be as little as even 15 minutes. We see on average, people are spending between 20 and 35 minutes to get a charge at these faster chargers. And again, that time is decreasing as the vehicle technology advances. Right now, these chargers are typically found along major travel corridors. So they're serving people that are taking long trips, whether they're vacation travelers or somebody that's on a business trip from one part of the state to the other. If you live in Portland and you have to go up to Bangor frequently for work, that's a great situation where you're probably going to need a little bit of a charge to get there and back. Keep in mind that most vehicles have 250 to 300 miles of driving range already. So the range of these vehicles is fairly impressive. And it is less in the winter, so keep that in mind as a state that does have cold weather. And as I already mentioned, these chargers have a higher cost, upwards of $100,000 per port for the total project. So big difference here between level 2 and level 3 chargers. That's why we don't see a DC fast charger on every street corner at every gas station. It costs a lot of money. And that's also why we have public subsidies right now that are helping to expand the availability of these chargers. So a little bit more about typical costs, in case you're curious. This is all in our public EV charging guide, but for level 2 chargers, this is just a breakdown of where those costs come in. You've got the charging equipment itself. You can see there's a difference between the costs for networked and non-networked chargers. The installation can also vary quite a bit from site to site. So it could be as little as $500, could be as much as $10,000 per port, depending on the electrical upgrades that are needed to accommodate those chargers. And then for network chargers, you have networking subscription costs that allow you to collect payment. Factors that influence cost are the distance from the electrical panel or the electrical supply. Sometimes you're going to be adding a new electrical service for these chargers. For networked chargers, the equipment is typically more expensive than non-networked, in addition to those ongoing costs. So those are just some of the factors that go into the cost of such a project. And we do see a very wide range. Barry would tell you as well. It really depends on the site. There's no way to pinpoint without knowing your site super well and without talking to an electrician. It's really hard to tell how much one of these projects is going to cost. And any trenching that you have to do to get to the chargers that's one of the biggest aspects of the installation cost. So a couple of ways to get started if you're just at the beginning of this process. We always recommend contacting a vendor or an installer first to sort of start to get some of those cost estimates. Typically for our incentives, we require quotes for each element of the project, because before we calculate how much incentive you're eligible for, we need to know how much the project's going to cost. And because there's such a huge range, you have to consult with a number of vendors to get those project quotes beforehand. So it's always good to start that early. Sometimes vendors are busy. They don't always get back to you as quickly as you'd like them to. So it's really important to reach out early on. We have a list of these vendors on our website at efficiencymaine.com. So if you're looking for a charging equipment vendor, networking vendor, we have a list of these EV charging service providers, they're called. And if you're looking for an electrician, most licensed electricians can do this work. Some of them are more willing to take on EV charging project than others. So if you would like to contact an Efficiency Maine qualified partner that's indicated they're available for EV charging projects, you can do that via our qualified partner locator tool at efficiencymaine.com. So those are just some of the ways that you can get started with one of these projects. If you've read through the guidebook and you're like, let's start this, and these are just some ways that you can start to reach out. So we do have incentives available right now for certain parts of the state for level 2 chargers. So through our rural level 2 EV charging funding opportunity notice, we have incentives now that will cover 90% of the project cost up to a cap of $8,000 per level 2 charging plug for network chargers, and that's for local government projects. We also have incentives for businesses and nonprofits because these entities can also play a role in supporting public EV charging. This is currently available for Cumberland and York counties. We closed out a previous round for all the other counties. So now we're looking at Southern Maine. The application deadline is June 30th, and you can find more information on our opportunities page at efficiencymaine.com. And then I also want to mention a couple of upcoming events and webinars that we have. I just came off of another one right before this one about the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program, which is a huge federal discretionary grant program that Maine is planning to submit a statewide grant application for that will fund expanding public level 2 and DC fast charging in communities. So if that's something that you're interested in and you didn't get to attend that webinar this morning, we can provide you the slides and the recording. So just email us after this and we'll be happy to send those over to you. We also have an upcoming webinar on the 13th about the rural level 2 program that I mentioned. We have an RFP out for DC fast charging in Aroostook and Washington counties. That's phase 4-2. So if you're located in that part of the state, we have a bidders webinar coming up for that on May 9th. And we have another RFP for DC fast charging right now, which is called phase 5. That's for Augusta, Bangor, and coastal Route 1 between Freeport and Ellsworth. So again, another webinar coming up on May 10th for that. So lots of opportunities to learn more about, even if you're a municipality and you're not necessarily looking to own and operate these DC fast chargers, if you're interested in learning about how businesses in your area can participate in this, these are great opportunities for that. So you can find that again on our opportunities page. We also have a bunch of additional resources on our website. In addition to the guide, we have a video series. So if you like to consume video content rather than reading through a guidebook, we have that as well. The list of EV charging service providers I mentioned. We have links to US Department of Energy and other websites with more information on specific topics, a charging station locator, vehicle cost calculator, and more information about our past and ongoing EV initiatives. So that's all at efficiencymaine.com. And if you want to keep up to date on our programs and funding opportunities, you can sign up for our EV notices email list. That's at the link on this slide. And then again, look for more information about our current funding opportunities on our opportunities page. And you can always email us or give us a call and somebody will be on the line to help answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Molly. Another great plethora of information, really, really helpful. Thank you to all of our speakers. We really appreciate you taking the time and offering your expertise today for all of us. I want to make sure we have a little time for questions. So I see, Barry, that your question wondering if CB had been successful with their QR code donation fundraising. And Scott, thank you for your response, saying that the QR codes were recently started. Some money has come in and that you're planning to add some more signage. Anything else you wanted to say on that, or Barry, anything else you wanted to ask for follow-up?
I'll just say, when I was talking about signage, we'll probably just like tape some 8.5 by 11s like up in there that are flapping around in the wind, just so people notice it when they come in. I think so many people are just in habit now, just pull in, grab the thing, and are not noticing. But just, and the ones in Norway, unfortunately, I mean, that's just a short-term thing, because everybody's going to be shocked one day when they come in there and there's charge point chargers sitting up there. But like the gem in Bethel, they already did the same thing. They have QR code and they just taped a big thing over the charger that you can't miss. They were getting hammered with people that weren't coming to the theater. They were going to there's a bowling alley bar next door, and people were just abusing it there. So yeah, I think it'll take a little time, but I think if you had that level, that free charging infrastructure, and you really pursued it, you could probably make that work in a situation, especially where it's in kind of in the public. Because it is, like Molly was saying, the difference of the cost between that and upgrading to a network charger. I mean, that's going to cost us $20,000 or not quite. Our charging, we're doing a lot of those network 2-plug things, and the cost of installation is all over the place, like Molly was saying. That one's not too bad because we already have a 200 amp service there. Paris is super cheap because they're putting it right on the building. We don't have to dig up put the pedestal in and all that. It'll be wall mount.
Yeah.
Other places
I
where
was
we have to run poles and put in a 200 amp service and trench and everything, it's costing us, over $10,000 a plug.
Yeah, I think it comes down to utilization. I think in municipalities, as you've experienced, Scott, the cost differential between basic charging and smart charging is very large at the outset because of the hardware and networking fees with smart charging. And so if you're not sure about sort of the strategic value and usage potential of a site, putting in a basic charger as sort of a starting place is not a bad thing to do. And then as it grows, that's when you have to come to a decision of trying the donation route, or maybe it grows to the point where you can justify putting in a smart charger. And the benefit there is you've already done the electrical work and conduit and everything. So it's not as big a deal to switch it out, at that point. But controlling behavior as more and more people just start driving EVs, I'm sure is going to become, more of an issue. And people, when you're offering it for free, you do invite a certain level of abuse, and you hope that people will treat it responsibly.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect Mainer's behavior is probably better than many other states in that regard. And maybe we can temper abuse politely and rely on courtesy and so forth. But ultimately, the smart charger creates that access and revenue stream potentially if it's a high use situation. So,
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Barry. We do have these little etiquette cards that we made a long time ago that we give to everybody who's interested, and we hand them out at our EV Expo and stuff, just to get people kind of thinking about how they're affecting other people. And to your point, like our charger in Buckfield, we're not going to put a network smart charger in there. It hardly gets that much use. However, to change that to a 2-plug system, we would have to upgrade electrical service there, because they just had enough to put that 1 plug in, and these new things are need 2 plugs. And the only other thing I'd add there too, if you're installing a single charger just to test the waters, make sure you have it on its own meter so you can keep track of what's happening there. It's not like on the same meter with your heat pumps or something where you won't know what's going into the, how much use it's getting, because if you've got it on its own meter, you know exactly how many hours people are charging there, and you can make some decisions around that data. I see Chrissy's got her hand up.
Thank you both. Chrissy, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Chrissy Adamowitz, and I work for the town of Brunswick. My question is, I have 2 questions. For you, Scott, I was interested, you said you had a slide about your e-bike program, and I'm very interested in making sure that we are installing e-bike charging infrastructure as well as EV vehicle infrastructure. we're dealing with a affordability crisis here in Brunswick. And so we want to make sure that the green economy is equitable. So I am really curious to learn more about what you're doing for e-bikes, and if you've done any e-bike charging stations, and any information about that would be of great interest to me.
Yeah, I mean, what we did, Barry remembers this when Revision installed some of our stuff, when we had the EV chargers installed, just to put on the pedestal a 20 amp circuit, just with a plug. So any of our EV charging infrastructure, if you have an e-bike, you can plug in there. And then in terms of, we don't really have much of a program, but we do, when we do ride and drives, we always have e-bikes, and we have e-bike, bike shops come and, demo their bikes and stuff. We had Seacoast e-bikes come up and do a big demo day of their e-bikes and cargo bikes. During COVID, it was just all outside, and we had everybody scheduled, so we didn't have a whole bunch of people crowded around. That was really successful. He ended up selling a few bikes, but it's just like the cars. You get people on the bikes and they're like, holy cow, who knew how cool this was?
So just a follow-up. So it sounds like charging infrastructure for e-bikes is similar to EVs, like with the pyramid, the pyramid is maybe applies to EVs and e-bikes. Yeah,
it's really you're charging at home. You don't have to install anything to charge at home. The bikes come with a charger. They come with their own charger. But if you're trying to get, kind of leapfrog your way around on them, and like if you're going to be touring or something, my bike charges, I can put 30 miles on my bike in a little over an hour and 20 minutes. So, I could theoretically tour if I knew I had outlets along the way. So I think as we're talking about expanding EV infrastructure, just to keep that in mind, that some 20 amp outlets, 110 outlets are useful.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it. I'll connect with you offline if I have any other questions about that.
And talk to your reps about the e-bike rebate.
Okay.
I don't know what Molly thinks about it, but Efficiency Maine is potentially going to be tasked with doing rebates for e-bikes, which would make them extremely affordable, the low-end
Right.
bikes extremely affordable for folks. And they're amazing transportation. I have a cargo bike here. I can haul anything. I can haul a passenger. I could haul 2 kids on that thing.
Yeah. We have definitely a growing population here doing that. We're seeing a lot of cargo bikes, e-bikes, people hauling families on their bikes. And I think that's
awesome.
just really the way people are if they want to afford a green lifestyle, I think that's really a really important option that we should be supporting.
Yeah, and it is a big equity piece too, especially for elderly as well, from the
Right, and
recreational
not
side.
to mention all the other environmental problems that come with driving, but I won't go down that road. Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Chrissy. Thanks, Scott. Hillary, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I'm in Hollowell and I'm on our volunteer climate action group. We got in on the Efficiency Maine fall incentive. Thank you, Molly, for all your help in our application for a network level 2 charger. And so that'll be delivered soon, will be installed soon. And the town is wondering, okay, now what do we do? They want to recover charging costs and they need to figure out how to set an hourly rate. And I saw that Scott, your volunteer donation was set at $3 per hour, but for a network charger, I'm curious, is there something like gasbuddy.com for EV charging rates so that the town can figure out, okay, what's sort of the norm? What are they charging in Augusta? What are they charging in Brunswick?
Yes, there is. And it's plugshare.com that Barry mentioned. That's one of the most commonly used apps or websites to locate EV chargers. And it also typically lists the charging rate. So I would recommend that. For level 2s, it does vary a lot. There are some that are charging by the hour and some that are charging by the kilowatt hour. So it's a little bit all over the place. I would say you're going to see a pretty big range. So just keep that in mind. You also have to consider what your goals are. And, are you just trying to recover your costs? Are you just trying to break even? Or do you have, additional goals beyond that? So we have a little bit of guidance in our EV charging guidebook, but I would recommend checking out PlugShare first to see some of the range. And also sometimes people will leave comments on those chargers on PlugShare. If they think the cost is outrageous, they'll let you know. So, you could check out and see if some of the nearby chargers, people have left comments about the rate, because, you certainly want to be charging a reasonable fee, or else people will go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much.
Hillary, that's a really interesting question. And Barry and I have been going back and forth via text about the whole EV charging setup that's up at Saddleback. And that has a really interesting charging structure there. There's 3 different ways you can charge. You can charge by the session, you can charge by the hour, and you can charge by the kilowatt. And they do all 3 there. It costs you $2 to hook up to the charger. It costs you $2 an hour to charge, and a very minimal charge, 5 cents a kilowatt hour. Other places you go, it's just by the kilowatt hour. But having that hourly charge on there keeps people from, like, when their car is full, they just leave it there for free parking. It's like you're paying for the parking and you're paying for the charging. Then when you get into fast charging, I fell asleep in Kennebunk one night. I was coming back from the airport there, and I was there for 2 hours. It was like $20 an hour once my car stopped. I mean, they want you to move that car the minute it's charged. So there's all sorts of different fee structures that can work depending, like Molly was saying, on what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, in Saddleback, you're a captive audience, but you're in a good mood because you're skiing, so you don't mind paying the extra premium, right?
It's still not bad though. My average cost up there is about 40 cents a kilowatt hour, which if I average it all out, it's still about what it would cost to drive a gas car back and forth. But I can charge the amount it takes me to get there and back in my car is the amount I typically can charge in a day of skiing. So it works out just swimmingly. Cost me about $12 a day to charge up there.
I think there'll be more chargers there at some point. Killington has 60, and they called the other day because by 9 a.m. they're all used. And so they need to start expanding. So that's just an example of.
That's great.
Yeah.
Skiers really understand climate change. So I think we're early adopters, and they tend to be affluent, so they can adopt EVs and think that they're helping the cause.
Right.
Saving snow.
So I just wanted to follow up. Chrissy had to hop off, but she did have a question, which I was really curious about too. What % of Maine's EV chargers are powered by clean energy? Is that something that we know?
No, but I think we can get somewhat real-time analysis from the ISO New England app that tells you hourly how much is hydro, how much is nuclear, how much is et cetera, et cetera. So I think that the answer is that it's increasingly renewable because of the renewable energy portfolio standards, and solar is certainly becoming the largest, most rapidly developing generation, source these days. So ultimately, hopefully it's 100%, but I mean, even if you're driving on coal-fired electricity, it's still, because of the efficiency of the electric motor, you're still, 3 times more efficient than a combustion vehicle in terms of transferring that energy. So it's good.
Yeah,
It's good to be aware of it. It's good to be aware of it.
Yeah. I want to ask a follow-up question, but I don't want to take up airtime. Are there other folks on the call who have questions? Just feel free to come off of mute. We've got a few minutes left. So now's your chance while you have folks on the call. Not seeing anyone, so I'm gonna go ahead and just ask. And Scott, this may be for you, or it could be for anyone. Just thinking about, are you finding that the installation of the solar to offset the cost of the charger is something people are asking for when there's with the free chargers? I'm just thinking, does that help incentivize installing the free chargers?
Absolutely. This high school, their whole deal was you can install this out here, but it better not cost the school a cent for electricity to run those chargers. That's how we got it through our school board. they were not like, we're not putting a gas station out there. We're not putting free chargers out there. That's the thing you get. We get it from a lot of the select board folks around here. We were able to make a good case to Norway. It's a tourist economy here. We're like, this is going to help the town. It's not going to cost you that much. But we did end up putting solar offset in Norway on the kiosk, which for a hot minute there, it was kind of covering the cost. And then, it's not even close anymore. So we're going to the charge point, smart charging there. But yeah, that made a big difference. And we even had one at the land trust here that was off grid. I think it was the only one in the state. It was an off grid solar with, a dozen panels there. And if it was sunny out, you could charge your car all day. And it was a level 1, you could trickle charge, but I was working down there building at one point and I could put, 40 or 50 miles on my car in a day, just not connected to the grid. And people, it's just like, I think it's a great visual too. It's like, oh, I can charge off the sun here. And if we're charging it when the sun is out at the high school or in Norway, you are literally charging. It's behind the meter. So you're just charging right off the charge controller there.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
go
would
ahead, Barry.
I would just say, Gabe, it bears noting, I mean, the vehicle, if you look at it in the residential context, I mean, the vehicle is the single largest load that the house is going to have. And so a lot of resi applications that have solar have charging, and you add a fair number of panels. I mean, on average, I think it's something like, the efficiency of the panels increase, but something like 7, 8 panels equal 10,000 to 12,000 miles of annual mileage. So, if you think about it in that context, it's not an insignificant amount of solar that's needed, but at the same time, it saves you a lot in terms of gas, and there's certainly the environmental benefits, and it's a good combination, whether it's public
Absolutely.
or resi.
Love to see more parking lot structures like shade over parking, because it stacks some functions there. You're shading your parking, and you're also generating electricity for your charging right there on site.
Yeah, we're looking at canopies, but it's really hard to find an economical one still. The wind shear and all the other things that go into the infrastructure for canopies makes it extremely expensive still. But
I think it makes more sense where your real estate is at a super high premium, and you.
Right.
Just a quick follow-up on the off-grid, because I've had, conservation groups or land trusts ask that question. So if folks are trying to do something off-grid, does that mean that a level 1 is basically what that system can handle, or can they do a level 2 charger for something that would be off-grid?
You can do Barry probably knows more about this than I do, but this was a fairly small system over there, and we were able to run the level 1. You'd have to have some serious battery. They make these like off the shelf or whatever, off the truck things they can just drop. It's got a solar canopy. It's got a huge battery bank in there, and it's a level 2 ready to go thing. I don't know if they're still making them, but I remember seeing those at one point. They're quite expensive, but it's doable for sure. This one worked well as long as the sun was out, but we didn't have enough battery there to, as soon as the sun would, if it was dark or the sun was in, it would drain the battery. And we had to cut off when the battery got to half the voltage drop, it would cut it off. We never actually got that to work that well because the battery voltage would pop right back.
But on a day-to-day basis, you don't need a huge amount of charge. Most people only charge maybe 6 to 10 kilowatt hours a day for travel, figuring 3 to 4 miles per kilowatt hour. So,
it's kind of cool though, if you are off grid and you have solar, most of the time, you're floating charge, like your batteries are full, like if you in the summer especially, and having that car to take that extra power, it's like you're getting a lot more mileage out of your panels by being able to use your car as a battery. And pretty soon, right, Barry, we're going to be able to just plug the car will be the battery. You come home, you plug your car into the house is drawing off the car, and the car will charge when you've got extra power. And that's where we're going. So you don't have to have battery bank in your car. You just have it in your house and have a little battery in the car to just run stuff when you're not there.
you can buy them now with the Ford F-150 bi-directional charging.
There you go. future is here. The ice age is
The Ice
behind.
Age has ended. Thank you. So thanks, everyone. I really appreciate you being here. Molly, John, Scott, Barry, and thanks to everyone who was on the call. Many thanks to Zach doing our tech. I did just drop a couple of additional Building Stronger Communities programs that are coming up this month. And the link to join those calls is in the chat as well. So thank you. We will follow up with everyone who's registered with notes and links to the recording. And I'll be asking the presenters for PDF slide deck so we can send that to you as one slide deck, and it can be an additional resource for you as well. So thanks again to everyone. Really appreciate your time and energy for being here. And we look forward to seeing you at our next Building Stronger Community series. Thank you.